The man in the photograph was not simply Gabriel's employee. His name was Victor Salazar, and Gabriel called him his brother. Many years earlier, Gabriel's parents had found Victor, an orphan boy living on the streets, with no home and no family waiting for him. They brought him into their home. They fed him, clothed him, sent him to school, and raised him beside their own son. Victor and Gabriel ate at the same table, celebrated together, dreamed together, and grew into men together. Although they did not share the same blood, Gabriel never considered Victor anything less than family. Years later, as the company grew, Gabriel trusted Victor with greater responsibility, until Victor became one of the people who knew almost everything about the business. And now, the man Gabriel had trusted like a brother was connected to the deception tearing his company apart. The location on the back of the photograph led them to an old company storage area. Gabriel made sure the evidence they already had was secured before anyone went inside. There, the last pieces began to appear. Old delivery records had been discarded among boxes and unused materials. Ernie recognized the place. It was where he had once been instructed to bring paperwork he was told not to question. Then Tomas noticed something familiar. Rico's hard hat. Rico had been there. The question was no longer whether the warehouse was connected to the deception. The question was what Rico had discovered there. Then, after days of uncertainty, Rico finally came back. He was tired and frightened, but he was alive. Rico had not been kidnapped. When he realized Victor knew he had begun collecting evidence, fear took over. He disappeared because he believed hiding was the safest way to protect himself. Rico had made mistakes of his own, but when he finally tried to correct them, he discovered how difficult escaping a lie could become. Now, he had returned for one reason. Hiding would never make the truth disappear, and the evidence he brought with him would help complete the story. For months, Victor had survived because everyone possessed only a piece of the truth. Ernie knew one part, Rico knew another. Tomas had seen things he could not explain, and Gabriel had trusted the wrong man. But now, all the pieces were finally in the same room. The original records, the altered copies, the evidence from the warehouse, Ernie's admission, and Rico's return all pointed in the same direction. Victor had once been grateful for the life Gabriel's family had given him. But somewhere along the way, gratitude became comparison. Comparison became resentment, and resentment eventually opened the door to greed. Victor stopped looking at what he had been given and began looking only at what Gabriel had. Victor had spent years believing he was the adopted son, the outsider, the boy Gabriel's parents had rescued. But there was one painful truth he had failed to understand. Gabriel had never thought of him that way. Gabriel never introduced Victor as the orphan his parents adopted. He never called him the boy they rescued. He simply called him his brother. Missing materials could be replaced. Money could eventually be earned again. But betrayal carried a different kind of cost. Victor had not only taken from the company, he had broken the trust of the family that had once opened its home to him. Gabriel did not answer betrayal with violence or revenge. He answered it as the owner, responsible for workers, families, clients, and a company that depended on his judgment. Victor's employment and authority ended that day. His access was removed. His keys were surrendered. The evidence was preserved so the matter could be handled properly. Forgiveness might come someday. Reconciliation could take much longer. But forgiveness did not require Gabriel to ignore what Victor had done. By the next morning, the construction site was moving again. Materials were counted. Records were checked. Workers returned to their tasks. Tomas could finally focus on honest work and providing for his family. The chaos at the construction site was ending. Gabriel had spent the entire day being the owner, protecting his workers, his company, and making the painful decision leadership required. But now the workers were gone, the office was quiet, and Gabriel could simply be a brother whose heart had been broken. For the first time, he wept. Victor was more than an employee. He was the brother Gabriel had loved and trusted for most of his life. Yet through the pain, Gabriel remembered, "It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in humans." Psalm 118:8. Victor had broken Gabriel's trust, but he could not break Gabriel's faith. People may disappoint us, even those we call family, but God remains faithful. And as Gabriel mourned, Tomas returned home to Daniel. He had found work, resisted temptation, chosen honesty, surrendered his fears, and learned to trust God. But one question remained. Had Tomas finally fulfilled his promise to Daniel? Watch for episode 12.